Hollywood. This is Casey Kasem on American Top 40, and we're counting down to the new #1 song in the USA. And now it's time for the hit song by the first male and female rock band in the history of the Top 40, whose leaders are women. The ladies are Ann and Nancy Wilson, two sisters from Seattle who write all the music, play guitar, and sing all the songs. And they also call all the shots for their 6-member group called Heart. Now, over the last few years, several male and female rock bands have made the 40, including supergroups like Jefferson Starship, the Mamas and Papas, Rufus with Chaka Khan, and Wings. But most of those groups were dominated by men, who wrote most of the material, played the instruments, and sang lead on most of the songs. At best, it's been a shared responsibility. But this is the first male and female rock act to hit the Top 40, with the ladies firmly in control. Here they are, Ann and Nancy Wilson, the leaders of Heart.
American Top 40.
You're listening to American Top 40. I'm Shadoe Stevens. Next is the singer who says, if you think the rock and roll world is strange, try fine art. She's 38-year-old Ann Wilson, best known as the lead singer for the band Heart. Ann told us that in the late 60s, when she graduated from high school, she wanted to be an artist, a painter. So she enrolled in an expensive private art school in her hometown, Seattle. Well, that art school was just chock full of surprises. Ann told us on her first day of watercolor class, the instructor said, okay, this is your first day. I really want to teach you about the element you're in, water. And the instructor grabbed a big bucket of water, took a step forward toward the class, and then sent the water slooshing all over the floor underneath the tables, and called it an introduction to watercolors. Ann Wilson says there was another class that was even more experimental. The teacher took the students outside to the parking lot, where they spread yards of canvas on the ground. Next, they took paints and splashed different colors all over the canvas. And then the teacher went to his car, started it up, and then drove it back and forth over the whole thing, creating what could only be called a tire tread masterpiece. Ann Wilson says it was 1968. Anything goes. You expressed yourself, and it was art. A lot of people did really well, but it was too much for me. It just didn't work out, so I went into music instead. Here's the woman who left fine art for pop music, Heart's Ann Wilson, singing a duet this week with Robin Zander of Cheap Trick.
Casey's Top 40.
Radio plays them, Radio and Records ranks them, and we count them down on Casey's Top 40. Now we're up to the current hit for a band whose lead singer once had a job selling fast food chicken, a job that made her both a rocker and a vegetarian. It was more than 2 decades ago that Ann Wilson, lead singer of Heart, landed her first real job. Like a lot of teenagers, she worked at a fast food chain, a chain that featured fried chicken. One of Ann's jobs was to inspect the hundreds of pounds of chicken that would come in every day. Then she had to pull off as much of the fat as she could. Well, Ann told us she lasted about 15 minutes on that particular task. She says, quote, I had never really thought about chickens before. I just couldn't do it. So she told the manager she wasn't up to that job. Then he assigned her to make coleslaw instead. But Ann says, I was no good at that either. And the final straw came when they told me I had to show up wearing a white uniform. I refused and got fired for bad attitude. Well, the bad news was that Ann was unemployed. The good news was that she realized she didn't want that job anyway, or any regular job. She wanted a life in rock and roll. Ann also realized that after the chicken incident, she could never again bring herself to eat a living creature. And she became a vegetarian. Ann says, quote, I should send that fried chicken stand a platinum record. If they hadn't fired me, I might never have gone on to do what I did. What Ann did was become a star. She scored 16 Top 40 hits, including the song that's at number 37 this week on Casey's Top 40.
American Top 40.
You're tuned to AT40 with The Shadow. And this next band says their current album, Brigade, is a return to roots. Guitarist Nancy Wilson says all of the different eras of Heart are represented. And Nancy was a multiple musical threat. She also played dobro, mandolin, and blues harp on the album. Up 4 to number 13 from Brigade, here's Heart and Stranded.
American Top 40.
And next is the latest hit by Heart off their album Desire Walks On. Lead singer on this one, Nancy Wilson, says, everybody was pushing professional songwriting material on us, and that worked okay for a while, but we got really disenchanted with the whole thing. If you're singing someone else's words, it's much harder to relate to than when you're singing your own words and putting across your own message.
Casey's biggest hit.
10 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was one of 4 big hits from the album that brought Heart back from the edge. Prior to this album, Heart was on the verge of a breakup. The group's male members had almost all departed, leaving Ann and Nancy Wilson with the shards of a band. The hits had stopped coming. Album sales were way down. Their record company even cut them loose. And then in 1985, they put out an album called Heart. And that brought them back bigger than ever. It gave them What About Love, These Dreams, Nothing at All, and the song that was one of the biggest hits in the USA 10 years ago this week. Here's Heart making their comeback with Never.
Yeah, baby, I'm talking to you. Casey's biggest hit.
10 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was a smash sung by Nancy Wilson of Heart, a song where she's trying her best to sound as if she has a cold. Usually, it's Ann Wilson who does the singing for Heart, but in this case, her younger sister took over the vocals. She says the first time she started singing it, she had a cold, which gave her a raspy sound. The band liked that sound, but unfortunately, Nancy got better. And so when she went back in to redo the vocals, she had to try to recreate what she sounded like when she was sick. The result is a song that was one of the biggest hits in the USA 10 years ago this week. Here's Heart with These Dreams. From 10 years ago, Heart and These Dreams. I'm Casey Kasem.